Hi, people. Morning away from back here again, as always, Andrew, as usual. Really quickly, just going to discuss something. You see what time it is now. Specifically in terms of how rituals work and whatnot. I've already explained this in the past, but unfortunately, people in general, um, especially those that, for example, want help through occult means or via occult means, they lack critical thinking abilities and or skills, or at most they are just too taken in, generally speaking, by whatever situation befell them, and they only care about essentially getting what they want, regardless of the implications involved, and they don't think about it logically and realistically. And this especially pertains to matters regarding love and money, etc. These two things are the things that most people want in terms of not just my clientele, but the reasons for why people seek out the occult overall. In general, it's either about money or about love or sex, but generally speaking, money and love. Um, what people don't do is, again, like I said, think logically. So people, let's just say they want what they want, but it comes from a bad place, attitude wise, in the sense that they're like desperate. They're taken in by either negative emotions or negative, or just overall mental negativity. And as a result, they don't think logically, like I said. Now, just simple food for thought is that you need to understand that things need to happen logically. When it comes to, for example, a so-called love spell, so in actuality, simply a love-based working or a working to get a lover or to get back a lover or anything relating to that, the conditions will have to be idealized regardless of what kind of work is done, what kind of energy is applied, or what kind of occult modus operandi or manner or way of working is applied. Let's just say, for example, um, I want a woman. It's just an example. I want a woman, any woman to fall in love with me, or I want her to be mine, blah, blah, blah. Then by default, you need to do something that pretty much no one does, with the exception of me, and any logical thinking executioner, is that you need to look at it logically first, without the application of the occult. As in, for example, just a simple example, there is a girl, Alexandria or Mindy, that I have my sights set on. The first thing you need to do is that you need to evaluate, okay, listen, let's just pretend that I'm the average person, I'm not who I am. If I wanted this girl or woman to be mine, I want her to really, I want to be with her relationship wise. What would it take? Sorry. What would it take? By default, you would simply say that, okay, listen, you need to, I need to find some platform or similar, I need to find some way or manner in which I can essentially interact with her. And then I simply need to be as nice as possible and as kind as possible, and really just do my best to make an impression on her in a good, constructive way. So without coming off as forceful or simping outright or anything like that, without applying any negativity, and then simply hope for the best. And then after a while, if you feel the time is right, you just outright ask her out. And best case scenario, yes. Worst case scenario, no. If worst case scenario is applicable or valid, then you're simply done with her. End of story. That's what I would recommend to any person. That's what you would do if you were the average person and you're a sensible individual. Now, when applying any kind of magic or anything occult wise, any kind of energy, anything like that, any method of working applicable pertaining to applicability, by default, the energy will do the same thing. It will create conditions and circumstances that make it ideal, as in, okay, bring these two together, but how do I go about this? Essentially, inflame woman with love for him, make her see him, provided he was invisible, and then bring them together in a similar platform. So the energy that you applied as a practitioner will do the same thing pretty much. It'll do what is a lot harder for you to do as an individual. Um, Obviously for obvious reasons. And it works in the same manner. So, it's not an issue, but in general, I've noticed that I'm pretty much the only person that has the sensibility for this. Other people in general are more like they only care about getting what they want, like desperate, etc. It comes from a really bad place. They just hypothetically reek of negative emotions and a negative mental attitude overall. Not mental illness specifically, but just being in a bad place mentally. Keywords being desperation, erraticness, finicky, focusing on little details, and it just goes on like that. Same thing applies to, for example, applying the occult to your income. If you, for example, as the average individual, you wanted to say, okay, I want to increase my income, I want to make more money, bluntly put, how do I do that? How do I do that? Sensibility tells you that you need to simply look for opportunities and avenues. It depends on what you do for a living, how you do it, to what extent you do it, your own capabilities, how long can you work, how much more can you work, how much more can you put upon your shoulder, so to speak, how much more pressure can you handle. And then you need to take the steps in order to realize that, you know, if it turns out that you can get a better job by, for example, having a degree and attaining said degree would require, for example, an extra year of either studying or similar, then yeah, then common sense tells you to go for it. And it just goes on like that. See, that's what you would do without the occult. When you involve the occult, the same thing is going to apply in general. It doesn't matter whether you work with a spirit, an entity, it doesn't matter whether you apply a Solomonic pinnacle, etc., etc. The energies that be, or the energy that is, or both, and the energy that is and or the energies that be will simply, quote unquote, simply, they will influence you to bring about the aforementioned and then some, as in they will either increase your ability drastically to be able to take on a better or a higher workload and or direct you to profitable opportunities. I've already discussed this in the past because they essentially have the energy has a bird's eye view contrary to you. The energy has a much better and higher overview of the situation and can therefore, like you're a Tetris block in the game Tetris, actually like move you around or move you around like you're a Monopoly pin to the point where you are where you want to be and then some. Sometimes it exceeds your expectations. So yeah, it does the same thing in essence that you would be doing. This is an existential concept, albeit and or but in a much more effective and streamlined way. But yeah, and that's how things work. But unfortunately, a lot of people in this world, they care only about, like I said, getting what they want at any cost by any means necessary without actually using the slightest form of logic because they're too mentally down in the dumps to see the forest through the trees. And, as a result, the message goes over their head or they don't take it into account or similar. And you just, you know, and usually that's one of the reasons for why they don't do well in general. You can imagine what it's like. I mean, imagine if, for example, um, you worked in an electronics store, just an example, or you owned an electronics store and a customer comes by or a potential customer and the person just wants to buy a laptop without caring about any of its features or anything like that. And you explain it by default to them. And they have an attitude along the lines of, yeah, 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 I don't care. The only thing I care about is that it can download videos at a heavy set basis, like 100 videos a day. And despite the fact that you explained it to the person, you can clearly tell that the person is like essentially tone deaf. And the person only cares about, again, getting what they want by any means necessary. Because these are the same kind of people that will come back, essentially, This is the same kind of individual that will come back and then essentially say, you know, this thing sucks. I want my money back. It doesn't download 100 videos a day, despite the fact that you clearly explained the process to them as an employee and or the owner. So yeah, you can see how just annoying straight up that is, not to mention laughable. So yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind to keep your senses about you.